My name is Daniel Torres, and I used to think love was something you stumbled into by luck. The day I met Lena proved that, but it also taught me how quickly love can turn into something you don't recognize anymore. Before we get into the sweet part, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. If you're watching us for the first time, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notifications so you never miss any new story. It started on a Tuesday. Nothing special about it. I was at my auto shop, halfway through an oil change and elbow deep in grease, when Lena pulled up in a blue sedan that had clearly seen better days. She got out, frustrated, talking to someone on her phone, and I could hear her from where I stood. Something about a strange knocking sound in the engine and her regular mechanic being closed. She didn't even look at me at first, just waved me over, almost like I was part of the scenery. But then she made eye contact, and I'll never forget that moment. She had this energy, polished, professional. Like she didn't belong anywhere near the fumes and grease-stained floors of my shop. But there she was, asking for help, and I was more than happy to provide it. I got to work on her car, nothing major, just a loose mount causing the knocking sound. I fixed it in under an hour. We made small talk. Turns out she worked in IT at a mid-sized tech firm in the city. She was sharp, witty, confident. Before she left, she asked if she could Venmo me the payment, and we ended up exchanging numbers. At the time, I didn't think much of it. I wasn't the type to chase after someone who looked like they belonged in high-rise offices and wine bars. But to my surprise, she texted a thank you later that evening. Then, a couple of days later, she sent a meme. After that, it just flowed. One text turned into daily conversations. Before long, we were grabbing coffee on Sundays and talking like we'd known each other forever. I won't lie, I fell fast. Lena had a way of making you feel like the most important person in the room, even though she was clearly out of my league. Corporate, polished, always dressed like she had a board meeting to attend. She said she liked that I was grounded, that I worked with my hands, that I could fix things, and for a while I believed her. We started dating, and for the first year, everything felt like a dream. We'd spend weekends watching Netflix at my place or going on random road trips with no destination in mind. She told me I was different from anyone she'd ever been with. "You're real?" she'd say. "You actually listen?" But things started to shift when marriage entered the conversation. It wasn't sudden, just little things at first. Lena would mention her mom's disapproval in passing, like it wasn't a big deal. "She just worries because you don't come from the same world," she'd say. Or, "Dad thinks you're sweet but not ambitious enough." At first, I brushed it off. Her parents hadn't even met me properly yet. I figured once they got to know me, they'd come around. I loved their daughter. I was loyal, respectful, and steady. What more could they want? Well, apparently a lot more. When I finally met her family, it was tense. Her mother looked at me like I tracked dirt into her home. Her father didn't say much, just nodded and offered a weak handshake. The way they carried themselves, the subtle glances, the backhanded compliments, made it clear I wasn't what they wanted for their daughter. Still, I kept my head up. I told myself, "You're not marrying them, you're marrying her." And Lena, she seemed to be in my corner. She'd roll her eyes at their comments and say, "Ignore them, Danny, they don't get it." I do, so I believed her. I proposed. She said yes, and we got married in a quiet garden ceremony, just the way we wanted it. Her family showed up, stiff and distant, but I didn't care. Lena looked radiant, and for a moment, I thought maybe love really could overcome anything. We moved into a small house just outside the city. Nothing flashy, but it had a backyard, a cozy living room, and enough space to grow. Life felt good, normal, predictable in a comforting way. But normal didn't last. Lena's career took off almost overnight. She got promoted just 6 months into our marriage. I was genuinely happy for her, proud even if she worked hard and deserved every bit of success. I even surprised her with her favorite bottle of wine and a steak dinner when she landed her first big promotion. But slowly, something changed. Her new role came with more responsibility, longer hours, more meetings, and less time for us. I started noticing how we'd sit at the dinner table with her laptop open between us. How our Friday nights turned into solo movie nights for me. While she caught up on reports, I wasn't bitter. I understood hard work. I ran my own business. Too, I knew what sacrifice looked like, but Lena's job became everything, and I became an afterthought. We used to talk before bed. Little things like, "How was your day?" or "What's bothering you?" But now she'd lie next to me scrolling through her phone, responding to Slack messages while I just stared at the ceiling. When I asked if everything was okay, she'd say, "Just tired," or "Big deadline." This week, I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that once things settled down, we'd find each other again. But deep down, I knew something was slipping. She began to miss the small moments, forgetting our date nights, skipping weekends, breakfasts, always having one foot out the door. And yet, I held on. I reminded myself that marriage has seasons, some dry, some full of rain. Maybe we were just in a drought. Then came the comparisons. You know, Mia's husband just opened a second business. Maybe you should think about expanding the shop, or Chris just got another raise. His wife doesn't have to worry about anything. At first I took it in stride, but it stung. I wasn't lazy. I wasn't sitting around waiting for handouts. I worked my hands to the bone every single day. My business paid our bills, our mortgage, our dinners, our trips. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work still. The message was clear. I wasn't enough, and each time we visited her parents, it felt like walking into enemy territory. Her mom's cold stare, her dad's silence, the way they talked about successful couples with pointed glances in my direction. It was like being graded for a test I never signed up to take. Lena would always say, just smile through it. We're only there for a few hours. But those hours chipped away at me, piece by piece. Because the truth was, Lena wasn't just tolerating her family. She was absorbing them. Their opinions, their doubts, their judgment. I could hear them in her voice, feel them in her silence. I still remember the day we sat across from each other. On the couch, not speaking. The TV was on, but no one was watching. I looked at her and realized I didn't know this version of my wife. That was the first time I felt truly alone, and yet I was sitting right next to her, and I hadn't even seen the worst yet. The silence between Lena and me didn't just grow, it settled. It was in our kitchen, at our dinner table, between the sheets. In the glances, we stopped exchanging. We weren't arguing much, but not because everything was fine. We simply weren't talking anymore. The distance between us became the default, and I was starting to wonder if I was just some background noise in her ambitious life. We used to dream about building a family. I remember us sitting on the couch late at night, just talking about baby names and how we'd decorate the nursery one day. But those conversations started to disappear too. Until one day, Lena came to me, eyes tired, smile forced, and said she thought she might be pregnant. For a moment, I felt alive again. We booked a doctor's appointment. I was nervous, hopeful, scared, everything all at once. I wanted it to be true, not just because I wanted a child, but because I thought maybe, just maybe, it would bring us back together. But life doesn't always work like that. The doctor ran the tests, asked the questions, and then delivered the news with a calm, clinical tone. Lena wasn't pregnant. I could see her disappointment, but I was more focused on what the doctor said next. He started asking about her stress levels, her sleep schedule, and her work habits. And when Lena listed everything, the late nights, the skipped meals, the nonstop meetings, the doctor didn't even hesitate. With that much stress on your body, he said gently, it'll be difficult to conceive. The environment's not ideal for preparing for pregnancy. It wasn't a criticism, just a fact. But Lena didn't say a word on the ride home. I expected her to turn to me to say, maybe I need to slow down, or let's figure this out together. Instead, she buried herself in emails, taking work calls as if the doctor hadn't said anything at all. Days passed, no change, no reflection, just business as usual. And that hit me harder than the negative test. We had both said we wanted this, but it suddenly felt like I was the only one still holding on to that dream. So one night, I waited until dinner, poured us both a drink, and brought it up gently. I asked if she was planning to make any changes, maybe adjust her schedule, take some time off, just something. She didn't take it well. Lena looked up from her phone, visibly annoyed, and snapped, "Why?" "So I can sit around and wait to pop out a kid like it's the 1950s. I froze. Then she kept going. "You just can't handle the fact that I'm successful, can you? You feel small because I'm doing something with my life while you're still fixing cars like it's high school. This isn't about a baby. This is about your ego. You feel threatened." I didn't even know what to say. I felt like I had been slapped in the face with words I never saw coming. I wasn't judging her. I had always supported her. But now, everything I said was being twisted into some attack on her independence. And then came the dagger. "My parents were right about you. You're not aligned with where I'm going." Right there, in that moment, everything inside me shifted. I sat back in my chair and saw my wife for who she had become. Someone who no longer respected me, maybe even resented me. This wasn't about stress or parenting or timing. This was about pride, hers and maybe mine too. But I was never the one trying to win a race. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake wondering how we got here. From passionate whispers in the dark to cold, calculated jabs across the dinner table, I had ignored so many signs, thinking we'd course correct. But now it felt like we had silently crossed a point of no return. After that argument, something in Lena changed. Or maybe she had been changing for a while and I just finally saw it. She became obsessed with her image, not just at work but outside of it too. She started dressing like she was heading to red carpet events, even when she was just grabbing drinks with coworkers. She started wearing heels and lipstick to the grocery store, and she stopped inviting me anywhere. It was always just work people or, "It's better if I go alone. You wouldn't know anyone." She'd come home late, sometimes with makeup smudged and perfume still clinging to her. I'd be in bed already pretending to sleep, listening to the sound of her heels tapping through the hallway like she didn't even live here anymore. Our intimacy vanished. Conversations were transactional. Did you pay the internet bill? Can you pick up the dry cleaning? It was like we were roommates who shared a mortgage but nothing else. The worst part? She started comparing me to other men, other husbands. No, Mark just bought his wife a new car, she said once. And he's not even in upper management yet. Or, Carlos started franchising his repair shops. Why don't you ever think bigger? They weren't comments. They were insults disguised as suggestions. And it crushed me because I was already doing everything I could. I wasn't some slacker on the couch. I was a business owner, a man who worked with his hands, who built a life from scratch. But in her eyes, I was falling behind. Still, I didn't walk away. Why? Honestly, pride, fear, maybe even love, in some weird twisted way. I didn't want to be the guy who gave up. I didn't want her family to say, "Told you so." So I kept showing up, pretending, smiling through gritted teeth. But the truth was, I was dying inside. Then came the night everything changed. It was late. Lena had come home hours after she said she would, claiming she lost track of time with coworkers. I didn't argue. I just nodded. But later, when I walked into the bedroom, she was passed out in bed, phone still glowing in her hand. I know I shouldn't have, but I did. I picked up the phone and scrolled. The messages hit me like a freight train. There he was, one of her coworkers, the same guy I had asked her about before. The one who called late at night. The one whose name came up a little too often. They weren't just friends, they were texting things. No married person should be texting anyone else. Compliments, inside jokes. Plans, and then the one message. "I'll never forget. You deserve better. Just leave him already." And her reply, "Soon, I'm just figuring out the timing." I sat on the edge of the bed, completely numb. The woman I had built a life with had already decided to leave. She just hadn't told me yet. I didn't wake her up. I didn't throw a fit. I just took screenshots, quietly, carefully. I saved every word, every photo, every receipt. I knew right then this marriage was over. But if she was going to play dirty, I wasn't going to stand there defenseless. I stopped trying to fix things. I stopped begging for affection or asking about dinner plans. Instead, I started documenting everything. Every time she ignored me, every insult, every unexplained night out. I wrote it all down. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I needed to protect myself, because this woman wasn't just leaving me. She was planning to destroy me. On her way out, and I wasn't going to let her. By the time December rolled around, I had already accepted the truth. My marriage to Lena was over, not broken, not struggling, dead. But she didn't know I knew, and I wanted it that way. See? After I found the messages between Lena and her coworker, the late-night flirting, the plans to leave me soon, I stopped confronting. I stopped asking questions. I stopped hoping. Instead, I started planning. I knew Lena. I knew her pride. If she was going to leave, she'd want to make it theatrical. And if her family was involved, they'd throw a whole parade just to see me humiliated. But what they didn't know, what Lena didn't know, was that I was already 10 steps ahead. I hired a private investigator, gave him every detail I could remember, where she liked to go after work. The names of coworkers she mentioned, the hotel she once accidentally left a receipt for in her jacket pocket. The guy worked fast. Within a week, he handed me photos and video footage of Lena with him. The same guy from her messages, leaving restaurants, checking into hotels, kissing in parking garages like they didn't have a care in the world. The investigator didn't even seem surprised. He just handed me the flash drive and said, "It's all there in case you need it for court." And I did. I started organizing everything. A folder with screenshots of their conversations. A document where I logged every time she came home late without explanation. Audio clips from arguments we had where she lashed out. And now photos of her affair in full color. I took it all to my lawyer. She looked through the evidence and just shook her head. "You're going to be fine," she said. "You did everything right. And this is a solid case." I filed for divorce the week before Thanksgiving, but I didn't serve her the papers. Not yet, because I knew Lena. She wouldn't take being served quietly. No, she'd want to be the one in control. She'd want the upper hand. And Christmas was her favorite time of year. Her family always made a big deal out of it. Matching pajamas, cheesy traditions, morning gift exchanges, the whole production. And every year they made sure I knew I didn't belong. But this year, I was going to make sure they remembered Christmas for a very different reason. I kept things normal. I still cooked dinner, paid bills, kissed her on the cheek before she left for work. I played the role of the clueless husband. And she played hers, the overconfident wife who thought she'd won already. And then Christmas Eve arrived. We packed our bags and drove over to her parents' house. A large, cold, spotless place with fake warmth and real judgment. As usual, her mom greeted me with a stiff smile. Her dad barely looked up from the fireplace. They asked no real questions. I gave no real answers. I just nodded, smiled, and waited. That night, Lena was glowing. Not because of me, of course, but because she was finally ready to pull off what she thought was her grand finale. I could tell by the way she kept glancing at me like she was sizing me up, wondering if I had any idea. Her family laughed louder than usual, took more pictures than normal. I think they were celebrating already, but I wasn't nervous. I was focused. Christmas. Morning came. We gathered in the living room like we always did, coffee mugs in hand, wrapping paper everywhere. The smell of cinnamon rolls and smug superiority filled the air. Lena sat next to me, grinning, holding a small white envelope in her hand. She waited until all the other gifts were opened, then turned to me in front of everyone. "Merry Christmas, babe," she said sweetly. "This one's just for you." I already knew what was inside. I had seen it coming for weeks, but I played along, opened the envelope slowly, and pulled out the divorce papers. I glanced at them, then looked around at the smiling faces in the room. Her mother looked like she was trying not to laugh. Her father actually nodded, like it was some well-earned victory. Even her cousin whispered something to his wife and chuckled. Lena leaned back in her chair like she had just won the lottery. When I stood up, "Thanks, Lena," I said calmly. "That's a very special gift." Then I reached behind the Christmas tree and pulled out a small black box with a red ribbon. I walked over to her and placed it gently in her lap. "Open." "It?" I said, stepping back. She looked confused. "What is this?" "Something just for you," I replied. She slowly unwrapped the ribbon, opened the box, and the room went silent. Inside were my signed divorce papers, but that wasn't all. Underneath them were printed photos, full-color shots of her and her coworker embracing, kissing, walking into a hotel together. And at the very bottom of the box, a small USB drive. Her smile vanished. The color drained from her face. She looked up at me, and for the first time in months she had nothing to say. I cleared my throat and looked around the room. "I may not have gone to business school," I said, "and I may never be what this family hoped for. But I was loyal, I was committed, and I didn't deserve to be treated like a mistake." Then I turned back to Lena. "You walked into this room thinking you were 2 moves ahead. You brought me divorce papers thinking I'd be shocked. But what you didn't know is that I filed weeks ago. What you handed me this morning was just a copy of what my lawyer already processed." I paused and pointed to the flash drive. "You might want to watch that when you're alone. It's got more than screenshots, it's got full video." The room was frozen, no one spoke. Lena's mother looked like she had just bitten into something rotten. Her dad finally looked up, but his smugness had drained into something closer to shame. I turned around, walked to the door, picked up my coat, and said, "I'll see you in court." Then I left. Just like that, no shouting, no drama, just truth. Packaged like a Christmas present. That moment, walking out of that house with my dignity, my proof, and my head held high, was something I'll never forget. It was the first time in years I truly felt in control. The divorce proceedings started the following week. Lena tried to spin the story. She claimed I was emotionally unavailable, said I never supported her career, told the court I wasn't ambitious enough, that I was too content living a small life. But it didn't work, because the evidence told a different story. The infidelity, the emotional neglect, the manipulation, it all came out in court. My lawyer presented everything. The screenshots, the pie footage, the timeline, and the judge saw right through her performance. Lena had a high-paying job, so the court ruled in my favor. We split the assets, but because I had proof of her affair and she had attempted to humiliate me in a public setting, I walked away with more than I ever expected, legally and emotionally. She didn't take it well. After the verdict, she started calling, texting, trying to guilt me, shame me, provoke me. Long paragraphs about how I ruined her reputation, how I was never going to find someone like her again. I didn't respond, not once. Eventually, I blocked her number, deleted the threads, and took a deep breath. That was the day I stopped being the man she walked over and started becoming the man who walked away. The day I blocked Lena's number felt like shutting the last door on a house that had long burned down. It was final. It was quiet and it was strangely peaceful. No more texts filled with guilt trips. No more voicemails filled with rage and regret. Just silence, the kind I had begged for during our marriage, but now welcomed with open arms. The divorce had been finalized just a few weeks earlier. Lena tried her best to control the narrative in court, but when you're holding a mountain of receipts and evidence, truth speaks louder than performance. The judge was firm, fair, and entirely unimpressed with her act. She walked in trying to look like the victim. She walked out as the one who got caught. The irony. She had always mocked my profession, telling her friends I was just the guy who runs a garage, as if fixing cars made me any less of a man. But that little garage paid for her vacations, helped put the down payment on our house, and funded more anniversaries than she ever remembered. And now it was mine, just like my peace. But even with the legal win behind me, I'd be lying if I said healing was easy. You don't just switch off your emotions. I had shared a life with this woman. We had memories, inside jokes, old playlists that played on random days and still hit the nerve. There were mornings I'd still reach over in bed, half asleep, expecting her to be there. Then I'd open my eyes to nothing but the imprint of where she used to sleep. It stung, but not because I missed her. I missed who I thought she was. And that's the part no one really talks about, sure. Not just grieving the person. You're grieving the version of them you believed in. The version that never really existed. Still, I had no choice but to keep moving. The first thing I did was throw myself into work. My garage became my sanctuary. I started showing up earlier, staying later. Not because I had to, but because it reminded me of who I was before Lena came into the picture. I started taking on custom restoration jobs, old Mustangs, vintage Camaros, cars that required patience and precision. It felt good. Like therapy that smelled like motor oil and success. Then, something unexpected happened. A customer came in one Friday afternoon. Her name was Naomi. She had this beat-up Jeep that looked like it had fought a bear and lost. She told me she needed it ready for a cross-country trip she'd been planning for years. I told her it was going to take time. She said she had plenty. I didn't know it then, but that conversation would be the first of many. Naomi started visiting more often. First to check on the car, then just to chat. She was different. No airs, no need to impress. Just raw, refreshing honesty, she told me about her divorce, how she had found herself again by driving across the country alone, one state at a time. She had seen more sunsets in the last year than I had in the last 5. There was something in her that reminded me of what it meant to breathe again. We didn't jump into anything. I wasn't ready. She wasn't either. But somehow, we kept crossing paths, coffee, shared playlists, conversations that felt like old friends catching up. Even though we had just met, it wasn't about romance at first. It was about being understood without trying. Meanwhile, Lena was unraveling. Mutual friends, those who hadn't picked sides, told me things about how she lost her promotion after a scandal involving her work friend. Turns out, workplace affairs don't go unnoticed when you're in management. The company restructured and suddenly she was out. No fanfare, no warning. She tried to pivot into consulting, but the glow had dimmed. And without her job as her identity, she didn't know who she was anymore. I could have felt smug about it. I could have laughed. But honestly, I just felt sad for her because while she was trying to rebuild a version of herself she thought the world wanted, I was finally becoming the version of me I had put on pause for years. I started traveling, not far, but far enough to feel free. I took a road trip up the coast, stopping in little towns, staying in motels with no Wi-Fi, eating in diners where people still asked, "How's your day going?" and somewhere between Point Reyes and Big Sur. I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I was grateful. Grateful that she showed me who she really was before. I wasted even more years. Grateful that I had the strength to walk away with my dignity. Grateful that I learned one of the hardest lessons of my life and survived it. I stopped replaying the betrayal in my head. I stopped needing closure from someone who had already closed the door long before I ever knocked on it. And in that space, healing grew. One day, I opened a drawer at the garage and found that small black box, the one I had given Lena on Christmas morning. The divorce papers, the photos, the USB. I stared at it for a minute, then walked to the back lot where we kept the scrap cars, tossed it into a rusted-out trunk, and walked away. I didn't need it anymore. That story was over, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't trying to rewrite it. I was ready to write a new one. Naomi, and I eventually did go on that road trifers in the Jeep I fixed. Mine in an old convertible I'd restored just for fun. We didn't label anything, didn't force it, just shared the road, the silence, the music, and stories that didn't come with judgment or expectation. She once told me, "The best kind of peace is the one you fought for." She was right, because peace isn't passive. It's not something that shows up on your doorstep wrapped in a bow. It's something you earn through heartbreak, through truth, through the kind of clarity that only comes after everything falls apart. Looking back now, I don't regret meeting Lena. I don't regret the marriage, or even the pain. She taught me what love isn't, and that's how I found out what love should be. So here I am, Daniel, mechanic, divorcee, storyteller, not broken, not bitter, just better. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe to the channel for more of these stories.